All right, you little web devs, you're here for a reason, right? And it's probably because you're stuck on design a contact form for freeCodeCamp. This is the video for you. If this is your first time joining, my name is Rob. I'm with PreCodeCamp, and we have a video series going over some of the labs and workshops that freeCodeCamp is offering because we realize some of those things are hard, especially when you're just beginning. And so we're going to come at it from an instructor's point of view, where you'll learn a few tips and tricks along the way to help build up your confidence and build up your knowledge base. So that's the goal of this video. And all we ask in return is a like on the video, because that really helps out that YouTube algorithm. And feel free to share this video with anybody else that may be having trouble with it as well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the problem. We'll go through it together. Okay, so this is what we're going to be creating here. That's what it tells us. But I was looking over it. I haven't gone through it myself as far as any coding or any of these user stories quite yet. But I did a real quick scan, and it doesn't look like there is a lot of CSS instructions. And so we're going to try to create this, get it working along the way here. So with that being said, I'm excited about it just because it's CSS. We finally get to break out of just HTML stuff, but it looks like we have a lot of HTML stuff that we have to do first. So that way we can get on to the styling aspect of this, okay? But let's go ahead and go with user story number 1. So when it comes to some of these user stories, I'm going to have them all chaptered out down below, and we're going to start off with user story number 1. It says that we need to have a div with a class of form container, and all of our HTML elements that are going to be shown to the person is going to be on here inside the body. So I'm going to do a div, and again, my best practice that I'm doing is I'm closing off these tags so I don't forget it. I've seen it so many times in other forum groups that they're like, hey, my code is broken, the tests don't work, and it turns out they don't have the closing tag aspect of it. So please make sure that you do that. And then the other one that I see the most is when we're doing these classes and they want to have the exact word in here, I'm going to copy it and paste it because it is syntactically checked, meaning that a capital F, although to a human, this reads the same, but to a computer taking a test and testing out your strings here, it is looking for the exact word on there that they. So this should satisfy user story number 1. User story number 2 with design a contact form for freeCodeCamp. It tells us that inside of our form container, let's go ahead and add an element called form. All right, so that's pretty easy. We're just going to go in here. We'll do form. Again, open and closing tags for this. And that should complete our user story for number 2. User story number 3, it says over here that in the form element, we should have the following elements inside of the form. First, we need to have an H2 element with some text. So let's go ahead and do an H2. Again, open and close. Makes it really simple. And then we can add our text in between. So our H2, we're going to say contact us. All right, perfect. Next on here, it says that we need to have an input for the name with the type set to text. The ID, name are required. Okay, let's go ahead and break this one down. So this is the part that might be a little bit confusing, and I am just going to go with my gut just from the previous things here. I don't know if it's exactly looking for a keyword of the word name, but to keep this thing going here, I'm just going to use what we've learned from the past with the freeCodeCamp. So we're going to go ahead and do the following. And I know it doesn't ask for it specifically here because I don't see a label being needed, but it was shown in the example. So we're going to go ahead and do a label. And again, that's open and close. And then we're going to do the input field. And then the input field happens to be a void element. So let's go ahead and do the very first label. The first thing that this is going to be for is the name. So I'm going to do name, and then I'm going to put a colon there. Next, for the input, I'm going to give it what it was wanting, which is the type is going to be set to text. The ID, we're going to set that to name. And then we're also going to do the same thing for the label here, which is the name attribute. And we're going to set that to name also. So I know that might be a little confusing on, hey, we have an ID and the name. Remember that this part right here, that's more or less going to be used for when we're making a post request, meaning that if they're submitting a form, this is how it's going to be formatted to save in a database to destructure some of the information that was saved in that input field. This can be used for targeting on CSS, but more importantly, it can also be used with the keyword here of for. We've learned before that we can bind these two by using the keyword for the label, and we can have it point to this one right here. So that means to test this out, if I click on the name, the input field will automatically be illuminated, ready for me to type. And if I change this for any reason, if I click on this label now, notice that I'm not transported over there as far as my cursor goes. So this for attribute is what actually links this to the form. All right, now it does tell me that I need to put the keyword required in here, and that should help me out for this first two parts here. And then let's go ahead and move on to the email. So now that I have a good working one for the name, I'm going to go ahead and copy, and then I'm going to paste so that way I can refactor this, right? So this is going to be email, and I'm going to put email here. The type is going to be email. The name is going to be email, and the ID will be email as well. I know I said that in reverse order here, but that is what would be needed for this part here. Both of them are required. That's on there. Perfect. The next thing on here, it says that we need to have a text area. Now the text area, that does get opening and closing tags for it. So I'm going to do text area, and then I'm going to go ahead and close off the text area by doing that. Now we do need a label. I'm going to go ahead and grab this, and I'll put it down here. And it's not an email that I need, but this is going to be the message. And then down here, I'm going to give this an ID of message because it did ask for it. And the name, we're going to give it also of message, which means our label, to get this to work, I need to put message on here. All right, I believe that creates my form structure. And then the last thing that we need here is a button element. And the type of this is going to be of submit. I'm going to come down here, hit the enter key. This will be a button. We're going to do submit, close off the button. And the type down here needs to be submit. Perfect. I believe that is all that it is wanting. All right. User story number 3 is complete. Let's move on to number 4. All right. User story number 4. It looks like we already did it. I didn't pre-read this like I told you, and we definitely already did the label part. So it says on here, each input and text area need to have a corresponding labels, and using that keyword for, it needs to match the element's ID. And so we did that on every single one of these in the previous step. So I'm going to check this off as user story number 4 is complete. Okay, so it looks like from user story 5 on down deals with styling. So the very first thing that we need to do is we need to set up our styling with our linking of our styles page. So for that, we're going to the head section. You even see this nice little note down here that tells us, hey, make sure that you link your style sheet. Sometimes I wish they would just give it to us naturally, but here's what that looks like. We want the link, we want the relationship to be style sheet, and then we need to reference the styles. That's a plural, styles.css, and that's going to reference this document here. One of the things I always tell my students is, hey, to test to see if this is linked up properly, let's go ahead and change the background color of something. And the easiest thing to change would be the body. So I'm just going to do body here, background, I'm going to do pink. And if I see the pink color show up, that means the page are linked and I can remove this setting here. Okay. So once we got it linked, now we're able to add styles to it. We can target any kind of element that we have already on our HTML document. Okay. So let's go ahead and keep chugging along on this. I'm going to do a few things on here to set us up for success, and then we will dive into the user stories here. All right, so I'm going to try really hard to get something that looks just like this here for us, just because it's good practice. It gives some talking points, and you might realize some things and see it, and then you're like, oh, I want to use this in my project. I remember doing it in blah, blah, blah. So that's why I'm going to try my best to get it looking just like this, because it's good practice. So the very first thing that I would like to do with this is get the background color. If you noticed on there's like a little gradient, and it's going from the bottom left all the way to the top. And so one of the things that we can do here is we can create a background in the CSS. So we're going to target the background, and we're going to set this to a linear gradient. And if you're unfamiliar with that, we learned about it in some earlier modules from freeCodeCamp, but it starts off with the keyword or the function here of linear gradient. So I'm going to go ahead and put this function in here. All right, so the key thing here, make sure that you spell linear correctly, and then it's a hyphen and then gradient and then left and right parentheses. This thing will take multiple parameters. I'm going to go ahead and supply the very first one, which is 45 degrees. So I'm going to angle this gradient by 45 degrees, and then we need to supply two colors here. And one of the places that you can go and maybe pick out some colors here of your choosing is you can go through W3 School's color gradients. They have this cool little gradient map where you can select a color. You'll see that it does change the values down here, and then you get an update of the preview. So I believe that these two are okay to use, and that's what I'm going to do. So the very first thing that I will come back to my code, I will supply it with the very first one. And then the last thing that we need to do is we need to supply it with that complementary color that we had over here. So I'm going to grab this one and go back to the code. And now I'm going to paste that. It looks like it's back in the 80s or 90s, and we're going to definitely change that. And how do we get this to not be repeated down here? We have to tell the body, hey, let's give it a height, because right now its height is solely based off of the form that's on there right now. And so we can give a height, and we'll do 100 view height. And that should fix the problem as long as we remember our semicolon at the end of that function. And so now we have a web page wide gradient going across. Okay. Now let's clean up a few other things on here dealing with the body. A lot of times when you're trying to center things on a page, you will introduce Flexbox. And so we can do display flex, and then we can do some alignments here. So we'll do justify content, and we'll do center. And then we'll also do align items center as well. Okay. So you can see how it is now centered. I can bring this over here. And then the last thing that we'll do on here to clean things up text-wise is let's go ahead and add in a font family. So we'll do font family. Let's do Arial, and then we'll do a sans serif as a backup. All right. Cleanup's going great so far. Let's see what we got to do next here. All right. So we're going to go back to the user stories, and then we may tweak some things along the way. It says here that the form container, it should have a background color. It should also have a border radius, padding, and width. All right, let's go ahead and do that. So let's make the background color white. There we go. Let's add padding. Let's make that 20 pixels. Perfect. Next, let's move my head out of the way. Perfect. Now we can go ahead and do some other things on here. The border radius, let's do 10 pixels. Okay, we can see that it added those nice little border pixels on there. And then let's get some of these things centered up on the form. So we'll do text align, we'll do center. Okay, good deal. And I think that is good enough for user story number 5. We have border radius, we have padding. Oh, the one thing that we didn't put in here is width, and let's do 300 pixels. There we go. Now it's looking like a contact form. All right, we're going to be moving on to user story number 6 and see what we have to do there. So user story number 6, it says the labels element should have a margin and a font color. So those are the only two things that we need, but we're going to spice it up just a little bit. And let's go ahead and do the label. Again, this one does not get a dot. It's not a class. It's just the label. And I'm going to go ahead and do a color here. We'll do hashtag 555. That gives it a different color there. Next, let's go ahead and add the margin. But before we do that, I want to emulate what we had on the example one. And we can see right now that the name and the email and the message, they're all like smashed together. And that's because that they are set to display inline. And what we really need to do is turn these into full block items. So you'll see once I do a display block on here that the input fields are now going to be moved to the next line. So that's a neat little trick for you to do on yours if you're trying to build login forms, for example. And then next thing here, as far as the margins go, it wanted us to do anything with the margins. It really didn't specify. It did say it wanted something special other than the default for the bottom, but we can get away with something like this. We'll do a margin. We'll do 10 pixels on the top. We'll do 0 pixels on the left and right. And then on the bottom, we're going to do 5 pixels there. And that will make things look a little more eye-pleasing. Okay. So I think that works for our user story number 6, and we added a little bit of fluff, a little bit of flair for it. Let's move on to the inputs and the text areas. User story number 7 says that the input and text areas, they should have values for the width, padding, and margins on the bottom. All right, let's go ahead and go through some of these here. At the bare minimum here, it says the width padding is what it's really looking for, along with the margins, and I'm going to go ahead and target both of these at the same time. So we'll do input, comma, text area. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do in here is we're going to address the width. So let's do a width. of 100%. We will also do the padding here. Padding will be 10 pixels all around. There we go. And you can see that it looks really ugly at this point. That's where the box sizing border box comes into play. So we'll do box sizing. Right there, this is the border box, and we can see it pushed those back there for us, contained them. Next on here, it did say that we wanted to do a margin bottom. So I'll do a margin bottom, and we're going to set that to 10 pixels. All right, things are looking good so far. Let's go ahead and tweak this just a little bit more to make it look more like the form that we saw in the example. Let's give this a border. We're going to go ahead and set that to 1 pixel solid. And let's change the color of this to #DDD to give it a nice little soft gray there. And then one of the issues that comes with the text area is like, this looks really bad being able to move this outside of the parent. And there is a way for us to restrict that, and we can do a resize, and we can set that to vertical only. And so now if we try to go to the right, we can't, but it's now self-contained, okay? So that's a neat little trick to have that it may not be in your toolbox. All right, I believe that this supplies, or this checks the box for user story number 7. So user story number 8 for designing a contact form with freeCodeCamp, it tells us that for the button element, we should change the background color, and then the font size needs to be different than the default. So let's go ahead and target it. Because we only have one button on here, that element, I don't need to target the ID or anything special. So I'm just going to go ahead and do button. And then here's where we're going to target the background color. As far as the background color goes, let's go ahead and use the hashtag here of 4CAF50, and gives us that nice little ugly green. But we're going to better style this. Let's go ahead and change the color of the text of the button. Let's change that to white. Keep forgetting my semicolons, so don't forget yours. Next, it says that the font size needs to be a little bit different compared to the default. So let's just use 1M. So we'll do font size 1M. And then let's go ahead and make the padding on here. We're going to set this to 10 pixels on the top and bottom. And then we want 15 pixels on the left and right. One of the things that we can do for the button is notice that like we don't get any kind of indication of a mouse change. So we are able to change the cursor and set that to a pointer. So now we get the little glove. Let's go ahead and make the button a little bit smoother with the border radius. And let's do 5 pixels all around. Okay. Now we are getting this ugly black border around here, and we can just set the border to be none. All right, perfect. We have the button. The one thing that it is now lacking is the hover effect. So let's go ahead and tackle that one, because I believe that is user story number 9. So user story number 9, it tells us that the button needs to change a color. And that's going to be a real quick, simple 1 line of code here, maybe 3, because we have to target the CSS. And so we're going to use that pseudo class. We're going to do a button. We're going to do hover. And then the curly brackets here, we just need to change the background color. All right, let's go ahead and use this hashtag here of 45. A is an alpha, and then 049. And now when we hover over this, don't forget the semicolon, we should see it just change so slightly of a little darker button. All right, I think that satisfies user story number 9. Now it's time to run the test. So this is where I get nervous, because like I said, I haven't gone through this myself. I haven't pre-ran these tests to make sure that they do work. But let's go ahead and run them. If we don't get confetti, then we know that we need to solve the problem. All right, we did not get confetti. So let's see what issues are we having here. All right, so it looks like just one of them. So let's see what we need to do to address this. Okay, so I think I know what we're talking about here. And it says that we need to have an ID and a name on the text message area, and I do. But the one thing that I'm missing is that last part here, which is required. So let me go ahead and add that. All right, now that I added the required, let's go ahead and test this out with a Control Enter. And there we go. We got the confetti. Great. We did it. Partner, we made it to the end, and hopefully you did too as well. And I can't thank you enough for everybody that watches these videos. It really gives motivation to keep doing these. And we really love seeing the comments on them as well. So with that being said, thanks for watching. We hope that you subscribe to our videos. More and more are going to come, and feel free to like and share. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Take Take care.